Hello and welcome back, and that is right. Today we're here to discuss and review this. This is WD's new 20 TB hard drive for NAS, the WD Red Pro WD201KFGX. But if you'll forgive me, I think I'll just call it the WD Red 20 TB. This is their massive single drive of 20 terabytes of storage, comprised of some real cutting edge hardware in order to reach that kind of capacity limit in a single drive. This pretty much is the biggest drive I've ever had here in the studio. I know they recently unveiled 22 TB drives for a number of their different ranges, and much like most of the hard drive brands out there have been producing and sharing their roadmaps all the way up to 2030, and some of the big capacities all the way up to 50 TB and more in some cases. But this hard drive, it has to be said, with that amount of capacity, that is a lot of eggs you're putting in one basket. And although it is of course designed for larger scale systems that are going to have multiple drives at once, are we going nuts with just how much storage we are packing inside single drives? In today's video, we're going to talk about the hardware architecture of this device. We're going to talk about what it can and can't do, and we're going to be going through its compatibility on a few different systems. We're going to touch on it lightly because I've got a much bigger video where I talk about hard drive compatibility and utility with this inside different NAS systems. So although I'm going to cover it in this video, bear in mind I'm going to dust on it with some screen sharing stuff, and then in another video coming very soon I'm going to go into much deeper dive there. But let's talk about the elephant in the room. Let's talk about the price tag, because you don't get 20 TB cheap these days. It arrives here in the UK at £576.99 on WD's own store. That is the better part of 600 nicker for a single drive. That puts this way out of the boundaries of the average home user. If in the US you're looking at about $650 in terms of US dollar, and again, because of things like hardware shortages at the moment, which have been impacting us, I think even as late as, as early as late 2019, hard drive availability, although the big capacities are out there, things like the hardware shortages, the pandemic, changes in hardware manufacture patterns and consumer demand as they work from home. Then you had droughts in Taiwan and semiconductor shortages and more. The result was that right now that price tag isn't going to change anytime soon. And if anything, it's probably going to go up rather than down. Now, the other thing is availability. These drives are designed, and they're part of the Pro series, for larger scale storage environments. Now, WD, much like other hard drive brands, had a kind of reshuffle internally in terms of its capacities. Not as much as anyone else, but certainly a little bit of it. And the result of it was that we saw that a lot of the smaller capacities got shifted to non-Pro series, and a lot of the bigger capacities got dedicated to Pro series, because the hardware architecture going into them was just Pro through and through. Now, that resulted in some capacities not having availability in the regular series, just the Pro, nothing in the regular, and the 20 TB is part of it. Now, I mentioned this has been something that's been happening with all of the hard drive brands. Some brands more than others. Seagate did a very strict reshuffle of their capacities, it has to be said, and a lot of their larger capacities you can't get in non-Pro after about 14 or 16 TB. WD has seemingly kept the ball in the air a little bit more than that with Pro and non-Pro in their series, but even then it's slowly diminishing. Why am I telling you all this? Because even though this hard drive is clearly designed for utility inside larger systems, even if you try to use it in smaller systems, you're not going to be able to get a hyperscale version of this. Now, what do you get for your money in terms of hardware architecture? Well, you'll be pleased to hear this is a conventional magnetic recording, or CMR, or a PMR, perpendicular magnetic recording drive. There's no SMR here, no drive managed SMR, none of that is here. So again, a number of you and all that stuff with WD and all the stuff we talked about in the previous videos, that is not part of the conversation with this drive. It's also 7200 RPM, so again the performance there is going to be pretty darn good. It is still a mechanical hard drive, so although it's, you know, a lot of these enterprise grade hard drives are approaching that 300 meg mark. They're getting closer and closer. They're not hitting it yet, with this drive knocking around, I believe, at 260. I'm going to check my notes very, very quickly. 268 megabytes per second reported transfer. We will be doing later in the video a quick docking station test with this drive and a simple Windows dock there. Along with that, the system's got half a gig, 512 megabytes of onboard cache. But on top of that, this drive also arrives with OptiNAND on board. Now, OptiNAND, for those that aren't aware, is kind of WD's answer to, well, kind of an alternative answer to onboard flash. We talked about hybrid drives before that had a portion of SSD and a large amount of mechanical hard drive space. This is not the same as that. It's a small area of flash pretty much dedicated to the utilization for the storage of metadata, indexing, that kind of stuff. The kind of small scale but rapidly necessary files that help general file access on a drive. Because the minute you get to this level of capacity, with the exception of regular defragmentation, you're going to have a drive where your data is going to be scattered to the winds, and you're going to need access to the metadata and the indexing and those tiny ini files as quickly as possible. And OptiNAND, they're saying, is their answer to resolving this ongoing kind of hurdle for a lot of large storage hyperscale users. They've got huge amounts of data, but they're actually struggling with the loading of just finding out where the damn files are, adding the odd second to access times, which can make all the difference when you're dealing with large scale data in this fashion. Now, going back to that subject of large scale data and this being a 20 TB drive, the actual internals are 9 platters, with each platter having 2.2 terabytes of storage each, which, again, even if you think back as little as 5 to 6 years, that is insane, the boundaries that are being broken now on hard drives. And again, things like energy-assisted magnetic recording and helium sealing technology, basically the conventions of magnetic recording as we know them, changing. And even on a molecular level, the areas that are being utilized on each platter, the advancements that are happening in storage capabilities mean that although 20 TB sounds massive, the escalation towards 22, 24, 26, etc. are going to be a lot quicker than you would imagine. It's not just a Moore's Law thing. The technology is now opened up and is stable here. Now, as this is a NAS hard drive, you'll be unsurprised to hear that we've got NASware 3.0 on board. That is their own tailored NAS firmware, where the drive is being geared towards utilization 24/7 and to be adaptive towards increased pressure, vibration and more. Things like 3D active balance for that kind of vibration on the dual plane build of it, the multi-axis control with the disks running that many platters at once. You know, there's a lot of work that's gone into this drive. It's not just the same as the 16 and 18 TB, but they've lumped on another platter. There's a great deal more to it. If we open the drive up, which a number of you are going, my God, it's been 4 or 5 minutes, why have you not even opened up that fancy static bag? We can have a little look at the drive, and again, it is quite the chunky monkey, isn't it? Look at it, it's a big old drive. I believe we're starting to really hit the boundaries of just how much you can fit inside a 3.5-inch bay. Just to put that into perspective, this is a tray from Synology. This is a tray from a DS2422 Plus. And, oh, sorry for the microphone bang there. If we get that inside there, look how much of the drive is living outside of that tray. Again, we really are hitting kind of the limits of how much space we're able to play with there. And again, a lot of that is those 9 platters, but also just the additional work and sealing that's gone into this to keep it all together. And again, it is a SATA drive there, so SATA 6 gig, but again, even though SATA is going to crack out 550 to 600 megs, this isn't going to give you that because it's still mechanical. Again, there's been efforts to kind of challenge that performance within SATA on the hard drive level. Things like, again, hybrid storage drives, you know, multi-actuator reading, that kind of stuff. And again, as good as it gets, even in SAS level, I still don't think we're ever going to hit more than about 4 to 450, which again, domestic SSDs have been giving us that performance for 4 to 5 years. Yes, they cost more, but that performance threshold, it has been available, although questions of durability and pricing are always a factor. In terms of durability, This drive has the usual mean time between failure, MTBF, rating of 1 million, but again, its appropriacy in this day and age is diminishing quite rapidly. I would like to talk about the workload though. It has a reported 300 terabytes workload per year rating to it, which is great. It's also got 600,000 load unload cycles. That's basically the boot up, boot down cycle for the drive. So again, it's very ruggedly designed to withstand a lot of the rigors of utility. And again, a lot of that build quality that goes into NASware, a lot of that work that's gone into making this a server 24/7 drive, quick spin up, nice idle power performance levels, have all been rolled into this big drive. But what we're going to do now is I'm going to hop over to the test area there. I'm going to try this out on a few different NAS devices and get a good benchmark there on the PC, maybe check out some IOPS there, and just find out a little bit about what this drive gives us for its near £600 price tag. Okay, so we've made our way onto the desktop of my test machine. We've got the drive here, and I think a lot of you, the first question you're going to want to know is this compatible with Synology NAS systems? It is a very valid question. A number of you have noticed that compatibility lists on Synology products have been changing. So I've got two Synologies that I'm going to very quickly test for you here. Here is our drive. So the first NAS we're going to be testing is a big one. This is the DS2422 Plus. We've already got the system set up with a Synology RAID volume there, and it should be highlighted that on no Synology lists is the WD Red Pro 20TB drive visible at all. So we've got the tray all set up here. We've got our big old drive ready. So I'm just going to slot this inside our system. We've got it inside there, and it should take just a moment before the drive appears on our system. Now, for those of you that have been following the channel recently, you'll know that I've been talking a lot about third-party drives in Synology systems. So a lot of the notifications you're seeing here are from different things I've been doing in previous videos. So you can ignore most of these notifications for now. But if we make our way into the drives, we'll be able to see that I can hear the drive start to spin up there. Unsurprisingly, because this is quite a beefy little drive, it's not going to be the quietest. And later on, I am going to show you some noise from this drive when in operation. But as you can see, the drive has appeared. So as you can see, it is being listed as unverified. This isn't unusual in the current state of play with Synology systems, but if we go into the health info there, we're able to see that we can conduct our smart tests as needed. We can find out more information about it. We've got the history of the drive that can be obtained from the drive itself. We've also got actions and benchmarking tools. So if we choose to, we can run a benchmark on this drive, which I'll do in just a moment. And then on top of that, we've got the options for, checking the drive in any shape or form. We can go ahead, if we choose to create a new storage drive. So if we choose to, we can go ahead and create a storage pool. What I'll do is I'll leave the benchmark for the other video, actually. We won't do that in this. So if we call this 20TB there is our 11th drive. As you can see, it's telling us it's an unverified drive. We can skip the drive check for now. Click OK. And it's going to allow us to create a storage pool with this drive. Now, obviously, this is just straight away. This is at the beginning. This doesn't indicate long-term storage as it creates that drive there. But if we can create a storage pool, we can create a volume. If we can create a volume, we can do more than that. Now, do remember that it says that if you use a drive like this in the DS2422 or 22 series enterprise or hyperscale systems from Synology, this storage will be labelled with a warning. So do bear that in mind when the system is in use. What we're going to do now is get this drive removed from this system and try it out on a different Synology system. I'm going to fast forward while I remove the drive. Okay, so the next NAS we're going to try is the DS920 Plus, a very, very popular NAS from Synology, been around for a couple of years, and we're going to take the exact same drive and just pop it inside that system to see what happens. Let's get this lined up and inside the system. Again, I will talk a little bit why this is a big deal, but again, there's that 20TB drive. I'm just going to nip over and put it in the system. And the drive is inside once again because it's such a large drive. The cavities are pretty much getting pushed to their breaking point inside these systems. While we wait for that to spin up, it's worth remembering that Unlike that DS2422 Plus that we just utilized, the compatibility list on the DS920 is a little bit broader. It supports a lot more than just their own drives, and on here you can find numerous other different drives. However, it is also worth remembering that there isn't a listing for a 20 TB drive on here. Indeed, they haven't even got the 18 TBs listed on there. Now, there is a school of thought that the reason for this is that Synology don't produce larger than 16 TB drives in-house, but again, I'm not 100% certain about that. Maybe it's to do with the volume or pool thing, who knows. If we make our way back into the storage pool and look at the available listed drives, we're able to see there on the listed drives, we've got a WD Red that I installed in there already, and of course, there is our 20 TB drive. We don't have the angry message yet, which is a nice thing to see. And again, we go to the health info there. We can do the smart test, everything we could see before. And indeed, all of those options are there. We've got the option for the benchmark there, which we'll do in the other video. And again, there's our 20 TB and there's our 4 TB there. So again, why don't we go ahead and start creating ourselves a storage pool with this drive. Do we have the option? We'll call it 20 TB again. Click next. And again, there's our 20 TB drive. Click next. And again, despite there not being the on-screen top-end warning about the drive or listing the drive as, unsupported, we are still getting a drive that's not listed on that compatibility list there, which indeed is true. Synology have highlighted that it is not on their compatibility list, but it's maybe off-putting for some. But for now, let's go ahead and just get our new storage pool set up on that 20 TB drive. And again, it should be very straightforward. The ability to create a volume, the ability to create a pool, it's all pretty much listed on there. The system is making a point of letting us know that the drive is not in use, but it hasn't highlighted in the event logs that it's not a compatible drive, which is a stark contrast from what we saw on the DS2422 Plus. Again, part of Synology's compatibility choices there. And as you can see, whereas the other drive was listed at risk on the other one, here it is listed as healthy and fine. So what I'm going to do now is delete this and now get the drive inserted inside a QNAP. And then from there, we're going to see how the QNAP interprets what we see here. Now for the QNAP, we're going to be utilising the brand new TS464. It's their new prosumer 4-bay and comparable but a much more recent release equivalent to that Synology DS920 that we just saw there. Now as you can see, the tray is all clicked in. I'm going to get this installed inside the system, 2 seconds. And as we're waiting for this drive to boot up, it's worth highlighting that, again, compatibility is something we need to discuss. Even on QNAP, which has a little bit more of a free atmosphere when it comes to support and warranty on hard drives being used in their systems, and they have a much larger range of different drives and brands they're prepared to support, as we hear the drive starting to initialize. It's worth highlighting that on this, they only go as high as 18 TB as well. So a number of you may have come to this video specifically because you didn't know whether this drive would be supported on this system. But again, as we go past that, we make our way into the system. Let's refresh that storage manager there. Let's go into the storage and snapshots. We're looking at Bay 4. As you can see, Bay 4 has an incompatible drive listed. So again, even QNAP are getting a little bit more dicey about the drives they're prepared to state as compatible or incompatible. But again, just because it's not on the list just means that they haven't certified it yet. So that doesn't necessarily mean that it is incompatible, so do bear that in mind. But before we go ahead and create our storage pool, we can make our way into the disk, find out a little bit more information about it. So as you can see, there is our 20 TB drive. We can find out more information about the disk there. We can find out more about the disk health and run some smart tests and more. All of that built in, all of the options that we would expect. Again, we can locate bad blocks. We can create that volume if we choose. We can also run performance testing on that drive if we choose to, something I will be doing in the other video, so stay tuned for that. But for now, I'm seeing that as absolutely fine. So I think what we can do now is see if we can create our pool without hindrance. So let's create our brand new storage pool. From that, click next, select our drive. There is our 20 TB drive. From there, we're not going to give it a RAID because we can't. It's only a single drive. We're going to leave in all the configuration options there, nice and simple. And there you go. we can create our storage pool without any difficulties there. And again, although the drive did list it's incompatible, as it stands right now, it hasn't been quite loud and shouty about its level of compatibility. And there's indexing happening there in the background, which I think we can pause for a little bit there. And there you go, the pool has been completed. And once again, we can go ahead, create a nice volume in that pool, nice and straightforward, nice and easy. Go ahead, any settings, boom. We can take advantage of the whole capacity, partial capacity, whether we want to use snapshots. All the options are there to us. But again, do bear in mind that we are using a lot of percentages here in the background to reserve space for things like snapshots and more. That's why we're not seeing that full capacity available to us. But for now, I think that's absolutely fine. It's good to see that it is working. So I'm going to get that drive out of the QNAP and get it in our PC test machine. Once again, I will do a much more detailed video on NAS compatibility very soon, so do stay tuned for that. But I wanted to keep this more in the general review space. Let's get that drive out of this system and into the benchmark, the PC for benchmarks. Okay, so for testing this drive's PC performance benchmark, what we're going to be doing very briefly is taking advantage of the same test machine that I've been using in other videos. It's a Windows 11. Okay, so in order for us to benchmark this drive, what we're using is the same benchmark test PC that we've been using in other videos. This is a Windows 10. Awful. Okay, so to benchmark this drive, what we're going to be utilising today is the same PC that we use for all of our other benchmarks. It's a Windows 10 Pro system. It runs on an Intel i5 6-core processor. That's an 11th gen. It also has 16 gig of memory on board. We're going to be utilising the drive as an additional. We're not using it as an OS drive there. So we should see some half-decent performance benchmarks. Now, before we go any further, what I want to very quickly do is just take this camera here. I'm going to move my microphone slightly off shot, and then when I do boot the drive in the dock, I just want to give you guys some idea about any kind of boot up noise of this drive. So let's get the camera and the microphone sorted out. We've got the mic around about a foot away, so let's bring you there. So nothing. Okay, so testing is largely completed there, and if we go through the results that I went through on here, just before we do so though, it's worth highlighting on Crystal Disk, you can see how long the drive's been on. It's been fairly consistent all the way through our testing, no problems whatsoever really. There was a slight dip in performance when we went to some of the heavier testing, but I'll highlight that in just a moment. So first up, let's talk a little bit about, let's get it on there, the Crystal Disk mark. Again, you may have noticed earlier on that we had that number there at the start, this one, where the write was dreadful, and I highlighted that during screen recording software such as OBS, the one that we're running here, that it can affect write performance. And as you can see, on the left was the performance with OBS running, and the right was performance without OBS running. You can see there, the write performance there was comfortably hitting 250 meg. That was a 1 gigabyte test file there, and overall in Crystal Disk it did pretty well, exactly what I would like to see in a 1 gig test file. Now in Atto Disk Benchmark I did a couple of different tests. I did a 1 gigabyte test file and a 4 gigabyte test file, and as you can see, where it mattered at the 64 KB, we hit 263 over 263 again, pretty much maxing that performance benchmark, exactly as WD had said that this Pro 20TB could accomplish. In the 4 gig there, we had a bit of range of performance, and as you can see, occasionally there was that dip, that consistent, sustained write activity there. We did see a slight drop in performance there, but overall still consistently living at the 260 megabytes per second throughout for the most part on both read and write. Now moving away from Atto, we can go into AJA, and with AJA we did a couple of different tests there, and again we did a 1 gigabyte test file both times, but we did a 1080p test file here on the left and a 5K red full density file there on the right. Both of them on that WD drive, a single round test, and once again, as you can see, there was the slight dips there while we were dealing with consistent write. Now bear in mind when we talk about that, of course, is we are still dealing with a SATA hard drive, not an SSD here, so sustained utility is not going to be the same as an SSD, but overall, once again, comfortably and consistently living in that 260 threshold there, pretty much, with the odd dip throughout. So coming out of there, we can see that those are the main three I went for, and then I rounded things off at the end while utilising a Windows transfer there. So as you can see, as I couldn't screen record, and again I could have used an external capture, but it is being used for other stuff, you can see that I went for a 20 gigabyte mixed file transfer, just over 2,000 files over 71 folders comprising all the file formats you can think of. And that transfer of 20 gig onto this drive took a little under 2 minutes. Again, we did have to stop it at the 99% mark before it went away, so call it 2 minutes. And even if you wanted to be caveman about it, you can see that, 20 TB over 120 seconds, rate 166. But again, that is a caveman calculation there, because again, there isn't precisely 20 TB, and that's by no means. But if you look at the chart, again, comfortably living in the high numbers, dipping there towards the end when we went towards kind of the low size but high frequency. So again, overall for me, it consistently held that performance line that WD said this drive could do in this single disk benchmarks here. Let's make our way over back into the studio there and summarise what we've seen today and give this drive our verdict. So, what do we think of the drive? Well, overall, I like it. Of course I do. It's 20 terabytes of storage in a single drive. It's outputting exactly the performance that WD said it would. And although we saw some compatibility scares happening along the way, it did work in the Synology and QNAP NASs that I tested it with. But of course it's worth remembering that right now this kind of capacity does not come cheap, and although once you break it down into the price per gigabyte or price per terabyte it seems to work out, we are still talking about a drive that's between £500 and £600 or dollars, give or take where you are in the world. It is by no means a cheap drive. It's ruggedly built, and I like what it represents, and I certainly like that WD are changing things up to make the bigger capacities even more accessible. But still, 20 TB is a lot of storage to be in a single drive. So if you are looking at this drive, do know that you are putting all your eggs in one basket if you only go for one of these. So you can't buy one, you've got to buy more than one, and therefore that price tag has to envelop all that additional spending you're going to need to do. Also, it has to, of course, be addressed that the Synology and the QNAP systems, along with the one over there that I tested it with, and again, full detailed, much more tested video coming soon, but the ones we tested it with, both of them highlighted this drive as incompatible in their own ways. Now, from what I could see in the bench testing I've done, it seems to work fine, and the further testing I've done off camera between the testing and bringing it over to here have shown me that the benchmarks have been fine. So I do genuinely believe this drive is compatible with Synology and QNAP systems. It's just in their own internal certification processes they've either not got there yet, or they're choosing not to at this time because 20 TB is still green at the gills a little bit. But otherwise, if you are looking for a large scale drive right now and you're looking at the 20 TB tier, I see no reason why you wouldn't consider this drive generally. Its performance benchmarks are great, its hardware architecture is great, and even though that price tag is scary, you gotta factor it into the amount of capacity you are getting and the build quality and development that has gone into this product. But do check out below the link to the review over on NAS Compares, where I go into a lot more detail about that testing. And again, stay tuned for the much more detailed and deeper, thorough look at this drive being utilized in NAS systems, the benchmarks, what the volumes can do, what the performances will be, and if there's any other further hiccups within their respective software to ward you off using it long term. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching. If you have enjoyed this, click like. It really helps me understand what I'm doing right and wrong. And since YouTube got rid of the dislike button, or at least made it so it's virtually useless to you, it makes it useless to us YouTubers to know what we are doing is good or bad. So click like if you enjoyed it. Otherwise, click subscribe as we go into more detail on this drive and more services in data storage in the coming months. And otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.